this tutorial, I'm going to be talking to you about how to draw out a floor plan for your sustainable home. Now, this is going to form a really strong basis for the structure of your home when you come to the practical as well. So it's really important that you pay close attention to how to do this successfully, because it's going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to actually building your model. So I start off at my design stage. So I'm just working in my sketchbook at the moment, and this is what I'd encourage you to do, is just to come up with some rough ideas of how I want the layout of my home to look to begin with. So this doesn't have to be neat and tidy. You don't even have to use a ruler to do this. This is just giving you a rough idea of what space you want to be filling and what shapes you're going to have within the home. So I've gone for a very standard rectangular shaped home, and then I'm dividing the spaces up into living spaces, and then within that I'm putting the main bulky items that I'd anticipate to be in a home. So for example, a dining table, a sofa, the windows, which are quite an important aspect to get into the design, and I'll explain a little bit in a second. Now, from this original drawing here, you can see I've got a great big corridor running down the middle of my building, which I straight away realised is just a waste of space and isn't going to be very resourceful. So straight away I've eliminated that design and moving on to a second one. Similar sort of layout. I know that I want 4 main areas, but obviously I'm going to play around with where things are positioned, and this is where it's handy to do this in rough to begin with, because you don't want to spend a long time drawing a very accurate technical drawing only to realise that actually it's not going to work, it's not very realistic, and you need to start again. So you could do as many of these types of sketches and designs as you like, and it's all relevant, it's all work that you can submit as evidence towards your level 2. Now, the reason I'm putting the windows in is because, especially as we're designing a sustainable home, but actually generally any home, if you didn't have windows in each of the living areas, it'd be quite a dismal, depressing place to live. But by having more windows or bigger windows in a home, you're in theory eliminating your need to use as much electricity, because you're making the most of all the natural light around you. So that's why I'm thinking about where my windows are going to be in relation to me if I was living in that home. So for example, you want the sofa set up so that it's facing towards the windows, not away from the windows. In the same line as well, you want to make sure that you haven't got great big pieces of furniture blocking the windows and obstructing, 1, the view, but also 2, the light that's coming in. Now, at this stage as well, if you've got ideas for particular features that you want in your home, perhaps a colour scheme, this is the point that you can start placing it onto your design page. So this is just your sketching, this is really your thoughts flooding out onto paper. So I'm fairly certain at this point that I want a dividing wall between the 2 living areas, one for the open plan living and one for the bedrooms and office. So, and now I'm starting to think about how that dividing wall might look from one side. So although in my design you can see that the main bedroom and the office have separate doors, from the living area it will look like one double door. And I've just had that thought pop into my head and wanted to jot it down before I forgot it. Now, these are just, like I say, rough designs and thoughts that will help us now to draw a more accurate floor plan. So when it comes to drawing your floor plan, I would highly recommend that you use some graph or squared paper like what I've got here. This is going to make it so much quicker for you to draw an accurate drawing that is square. If you use plain paper, you'd need to use a set square, and it's going to take you a lot longer to get that kind of accuracy. Now, effectively, the floor plan is the same as your designs, as I've just shown you, is a bird's eye view. So if you would take the roof off the house, what would it look like from above looking down? And I'm just going to keep it really basic. Again, this is just about partitioning the different living spaces, making sure that I've got the right size and shape for each living area. I'm just putting in the main features in terms of windows and doors and nothing else at this point. You'll see as well when I add in the doors, I'm trying to keep that accuracy. Each door is 3 squares width apart. Again, this is where it's handy using the squared paper, because you don't need to measure each one. You can use the squares as a guideline. Now I am going to be putting in the other features of the house, so for example the sofa and where the kitchen will go, and where the furniture will go, but I want to be able to play around a little bit more with where things might go. So when I get to that stage, I'm actually going to be using tracing paper. This means that we can just use it as an overlay on your floor plan, which, let's face it, that's not going to change now. That's where the living compartments will be for my home, but actually where everything goes inside it could change around, and I might want to just try some things out. And this is rough sketching because, again, I'm just doing this quickly just to get an idea of how things will work best. Sometimes it's a case of you need to just try it out. So that first room was the study, so you've got the desk facing the window, so you've got the natural light, and then some storage up against the wall. This is the bathroom, so the first rectangle is a square, that might be the toilet, this is the sink, and maybe some storage space. Not quite happy with the layout of that. I think it looks too, if you was to open the door and walk into that, there'd be a lot of furniture in front of you, so I might revisit that on my next try. This is the main bedroom, so I know I want the bed against a wall, and making the most of the light coming from the window. This would be a wardrobe here, and maybe a rocking chair or something in the corner. That's quite a big room, so I'm not sure that's making the most of that space. So again, by doing these little sketches, it's forcing me to think about that. This is the main living area, so I want a nice large L-shaped sofa that makes the use of the light. This might be your media unit here, your TV for example. The dining area behind the sofa. And then the kitchen will be behind that. I still think I've got a bit of a corridor space happening here, which isn't really utilising the room. I think the sofa might be closing off the room a little bit this way round, so it might be something I look at in my next one. So that space there is just dead space, isn't going to be used much. The wardrobe in the bedroom is blocking some of the light. I don't like where I've put the furniture in the bathroom behind the door, and in the office there's another big dead space, so I think I'm going to revisit this and try again. So I've moved the wardrobe now behind, not behind the door, but against this wall, so it's not going to be blocking the light from the window. I think the bed was probably in the best spot really, so I'm going to keep it there because it still has the natural light, and it's not going to be facing a big clumpy wardrobe now, so you might have a nice ornamental rug or something in front of it to make it more cosy, and a nice open space. I think the office had a lot of dead space in my previous design, which I could make better use of in terms of storage. The desk, it still makes sense to go in front of the window so that you've got a nice view whilst you're working. And then the ensuite I'm going to come back to, because I think that was the trickier one with trying to fit everything into that small rectangular space. So I've moved the sofa now against one of the walls, and that way it's not closing down the open living space. Where I had it the other way round, it almost divided the room into two sections, so it kind of defeats the object of having open plan living. So I've moved that round, added in a coffee table. I'm making use of this wall as well in terms of the kitchen area. That whole wall could be cupboards, which gives us much more room for the dining space, which, if you think about it, that's where most of the socialisation would be happening, so it needs to be a nice space. Now to the bathroom. So I'm going to move the bath this time against the wall. So you're thinking about when you were if you was imagining opening that door, what would you see as you walk through, and think about how inviting or uninviting that might be. So you don't want closed off spaces blocking your walkway. You see the difference between the two, especially the bathroom. That looks very blocky and uninviting, whereas there's more open spaces, making it a nicer living area. Don't forget as well to label the items as you're drawing them. You might forget what a particular square is meant to represent. So it's a good idea to label each part within your sketch. Now this will form the basis for your practical session. When you actually come to constructing your model, your floor plan is what you can use to create the walls, and I'll show you this in a second. You can also use this plan to create your models for the different items that are going to sit within it. That way you know it's going to be to scale from your design. So if you're making your dining table, for example, you can use the measurements within your drawing. So here I'm highlighting where the dividing walls would be for my model. So these green marks are going to be the skeletal structure for my model once I start making it. I'm including where the windows and doors would go as well, because obviously if I'm creating a wall I need to make sure that I remember to create a doorway so that the model is reflective of how it would look if you were walking into the house. I'm now numbering the different walls, which will make your life so much easier when you come to actually cutting out from your foam board the different sections of your model. It can get a little bit confusing, so it's a good idea to number them as you go, and then in pencil number your foam board, because it will start to form a bit of a puzzle and you don't want to get the walls muddled up. So at the practical stage you do need to be accurate, so you will need a ruler and you need to be measuring carefully each section, else when you come to put them all together they're not going to be very accurate and you'll end up with a wonky looking building where things aren't quite square. So obviously the front wall, because my building is a square building, should measure exactly the same as the back wall, but I would recommend measuring each wall twice just to make sure that you've been accurate with it before drawing it out from your foam board. Now you also want to consider how high the building is going to be. Obviously if it's a really tall building it's technically a waste of space. A lot of grand houses will have that, but if you're trying to design a sustainable building then high ceilings are not very resourceful in terms of the space that they take up. So I would recommend probably no more than 40mm high for your model if you're working on an A4 size model. That just happens to be about the width of my ruler, which makes it very handy for cutting my foam board. So I always start with my model making by cutting loads of strips off at 40mm so that I've got them ready to go, and it's just a case then of measuring them from my floor plan and cutting them down to size. And as you can see, that would form this front wall here, wall number 1, but I need to put in the doorway. So I'm going to be cutting using my plan for the measurements, making sure I've got a border left at the top so that I've still got one solid wall with a doorway cut out of it. Now it's up to you how you do this. I'm just literally cutting a rectangle from the foam board to represent a walkway, but you could create an actual door if you wanted it as an additional feature, maybe using some other materials. And the same would need to happen for any windows as well. You will want to leave a frame around the foam board so that you have some stability to your model still. If you just cut out great big holes, then obviously it's going to become very fragile and be difficult to maintain its shape. So you'll be able to see now that I've created my first wall with the doorway in the correct place and it's accurate. It's just a case of me working around my floor plan, completing each of the walls, including the dividing walls, before then adding in my additional features.